Welcome to another installment of Off the Plugin Chain. So I started these in September, and I kind of had two of them. It's more like one with a second take, but my intention was to post these more frequently than once every 2 months. But I just figured maybe I need to speak briefly about why it's been a while. So I'm a full-time professor of psychology, and I teach a lot of classes and been very busy with that. But then also I got a new computer, and I had to take some time to transfer files and to reinstall files or programs, and then I've got quite a lot of VSTs, so I had to reinstall a lot of those. So that took a fair amount of my free time that I've had over the last month. Got some different equipment that I'm testing out, and so I think I might have had this USB mic when I started the off the plugin ones, but got a little different setup here. Have a webcam, a separate independent webcam instead of one that's built into my laptop that I was using. And so also been meaning to figure out how to record my DAW Studio One, Persona Studio One with OBS Studio, and that required that I use another program called Voice Meter Banana. It's got kind of a funny name, but Voice Meter Banana. The thing is great, and so I was finally able to sit down, configure all of these things, and my computer's in pretty good running shape now. Briefly on that, I was just using a laptop, and it had 2.3 gigahertz processor, 12 gigs of RAM, and a 1 terabyte hard drive. Well, I had actually upgraded the RAM in that laptop. I can't remember what it started with, 4 gigs, 8 gigs, something, but I was able to upgrade it just a little bit to 12 gigabytes. So if you're new to audio music or audio digital music production, computer-based music production, I think a lot of people would probably recommend that you're using at least 16 gigs of RAM. So I was doing a lot with 12, and it just seemed like it's time to upgrade my computer. I imagine some of you watching probably have better setups than I have, but this works for me. I went from 12 gigabytes of RAM to 32, so that's 2.5 times the amount of RAM I had. In most cases, it probably didn't make too much of a difference with my laptop, but where it will make a difference is with more RAM. I could load more large gigabyte contact sound libraries at one time. Now, there's always workarounds for that kind of thing where you can mix down MIDI tracks to audio tracks, which take less CPU and fewer resources. You can do things like what I was doing with Finale, my new notation program, where I would load in Contact and Finale, and then I would load in single articulation sound patches for all the instruments. And it was actually kind of a novel solution because you can do a lot with a long patch or an arco patch, whatever the case is. And, as long as you've got fully notated music in Finale, it'll play back all those articulations. And you get a pretty good representation of the sounds. Better, I would say, than if, you were using the Garriton sound set. Although some people are very skilled and astute at using Garriton personal libraries. So I'd gotten into software sampling before I even encountered Finale. So I already had Contact. I already had, I think I was using sound fonts back then. But I had already had a substantial sound library. So the fact that Finale allows you to play back sounds through VST is just pretty cool. You can kind of make Finale like a notation sequencer or a sequencing notation program, however you want to phrase it. So here we are. This is this program that you can see on the screen. This is Persona Studio One. This is the DAW that I settled on for now. I was using Cakewalk Sonar, but the Gibson Guitar Company, I'm not sure if I know the whole story, but I think they bought Cakewalk. I don't know if Cakewalk was struggling or what the case was, but Gibson Guitar bought Cakewalk, and then after a couple of years, I guess they decided it wasn't cost effective or advantageous to them to hang on to it, so they basically just decided they're not going to support it any longer. So everybody had Cakewalk. Just overnight, your program is like kind of defunct. I mean, it still works, but there are no more updates or anything. And so, unless somebody comes along and resurrects it, it's going to eventually become a dead program. So that was a signal to me that I needed to switch to a different DAW. Even though I work primarily in notation, it's important to have a good DAW for just doing all kinds of things, just different sorts of projects. And then if you work with a notation program, you can always export your song as a MIDI file and then import that into your DAW, and then you can mix it down differently and all that good stuff. So anyhow, I tried a program called Samplitude, and I think it has an interface that kind of resembles Sonar, so it was easy for me to work with. I tried Reaper. Reaper's really cost effective or just affordable type of DAW. The non-commercial version runs about $60, so that's really a bargain as far as a lot of digital audio workstation programs go. I was having trouble with Reaper for some reason with the routing. The advantages or the best things about Reaper are also the worst things about Reaper. And the number one best thing about Reaper is that it's customizable, but it's also the worst thing because since it's so customizable and you can download all these add-ons and stuff, you're continually having to sort of sort out how to use all these things. Whereas something like Persona Studio One, you can just feel this is a solid program. And Reaper's cool, don't get me wrong, and maybe I'll eventually sort out the routing issues I was having, but I would go into Reaper, I couldn't get the MIDI to play back or record, and I was just like, wow, what's going on here? And so then I would open up Samplitude, and then I could instantly record in Samplitude. I could open up Studio One and instantly create an instrument track and get MIDI playback. So to me, it just made more sense. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using. You got to learn to be versed with it. You got to learn how to use it, and it needs to be stable. So again, I suspect this is operator error in why I haven't gotten Reaper to work correctly yet. But that said, I'm less inclined to really work with it as much now because I think I'm kind of more committed here to working with Studio One. All right, now one thing I do want to mention, let's see if I open up Contact here. Okay, so this is the software sampler that I use, and I would venture to say most modern composers are using Contact. You might use Halion if you use Cubase. I think Propeller Heads has their own software sampler, but by far Contact is really pretty much the standard these days, and it has been for a long time now. But anyways, so this is the violin section, section 1 of the Spitfire Symphonic Strings. These are excellent libraries. Spitfire has just done an incredible job with their instrument emulation. But what you'll see here is that these different pictures here, you can click on them and that'll change the articulation of the playback when you're on the keyboard. You're playing it, so you can go from longs or consardino to pizzicato or to spiccato or tremolo, whatever. You can also see down here these red keys. These are the key switch keys, and so when you're playing, you can change the articulation by pressing one of these keys. Each one of these is mapped to the different articulations out here. So it's pretty cool. Be able to know how to do that, and if you have a MIDI keyboard connected, then essentially what you got to be able to do is while you're playing, you're gonna have to reach over with your left hand, and depending on the size of the keyboard, you're more than likely you're gonna have to do something with the octave transpose, where you can go down into octave and then click the key set key switch key, and then that'll change the articulation. But with Spitfire here, they kind of have a standard, at least for their own libraries, where the key switches start at C-2, and for reference, middle C is usually C4. Now, if you get let's see if I can show this on the screen. I think this is probably upside down, but let's see if I unplug it. All right. This is Korg Nano Key 2. All right, so I've got 2 of these, and you can use them as MIDI controllers, but the reason I got them, the reason I have 2 is because I use them to enable me to change key switches, articulations, if I got my MIDI keyboard plugged in. And so the one I keep one on the left, and that's for the C-2 ones, the low octave key switches, and then I've got one over here on the right of me that's mapped for high octave key switches, because especially some of your instruments like woodwinds, a lot of times you'll see their key switches are mapped to the high right portion of the keyboard. And I know one in particular that I use is Heaviosity, Novo Essentials, and then Forzo Brass Essentials, and their articulations are mapped in those higher octaves. So anyway, so you can do it with the keyboard by itself if you can toggle back and forth through the octaves. Most MIDI keyboards have a plus minus octave button where you can go down from C3, C2, C1, C0, etc., and then toggle back up. And so that's one way of doing it. You could use these Korg Nano Key 2 type devices that I have. I was inspired by a guy that I subscribe to his YouTube channel. I watch him quite a lot. His name's Guy Mitchellmore. So he's a British guy. I think he's based in London or close to London. And he's really an incredible, accomplished media composer, And he's also got this outfit called Think Space Education, I believe, where they've got a lot of online courses that you can go through that help you with learning all the different ins and outs of media composition. But anyway, watching him, he had a small controller device. I think it's called a Kai Mini MPC, I think is what it was. Anyways, he was showing how he uses that for doing his key switches. All right, so I was kind of inspired by that, and I got these Korg Nano Key 2 ones instead. So it's really irrelevant which kind of controller you get, really, as long as it works for you. But anyway, what I've been talking about is kind of like playback, and this is one thing I've kind of struggled with computer-based music production, is the difference between when you're just actually playing the music into the computer, or when you're setting it up or editing it in the computer. It's different. The ways that you approach music production when you're literally playing the music into the computer, it's much different than if you're taking the time to set it up or do boy, that name escapes me right now. It's this kind of way that you can do MIDI input, step input. I think that's what it's called. You can do step input and enter your notes into the DAW that way. But anyways, so there's some different ways that you can get the music, or the notes, the sounds into the computer. All right, so what do we got going here? What you can do in a lot of these DAWs these days is you can get it's called like an articulation manager. So in Cubase, I think they've got something called expression maps. FL Studio has something, I think it's called BSO. It's a articulation manager. Logic Pro has articulation sets. Reaper has reticulate. And Studio One just recently, in their last version update, they've got it so that you can do key switch editing. You can create key switch presets, and so that's what I'm going to demonstrate here. Now, when I was using Finale primarily to do music production, and especially on my laptop, these multi-articulation sound patches like the one I have on the screen, that would take up a lot of RAM. And when you got 12 gigs of RAM, that's a lot of real estate that memory-wise, that you're not going to be able to load up that many instruments. So what I did instead, I already described, I loaded in the single articulation patches, typically the legato or arco type, or the one that's called long, and you get pretty good playback if you've got a fully notated score where you've put in all the little dots and everything for your staccato and all your phrase marks and everything, and you've included dynamic marks. You can get pretty good playback and mix down in Finale, actually. So this is different working with the DAW, and a lot of people out there I read about, I watch their videos. They're big proponents of these kind of massive orchestral templates in their DAWs, where they'll have literally hundreds of tracks. Some of these composers actually have thousands, a couple thousand or more tracks, and it's just, I don't even know how you could deal with all of that. But the rationale is that a lot of times what they're doing is they're loading in separate articulations on separate tracks. So each track would have a separate articulation. If you had violins like the patch in front of me, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like there's 9 articulations. that are possible in this Spitfire Symphonic Strings Violins 1. Now, an alternative would be, instead of using that one, you would create 9 tracks, 9 violin tracks just for the violin 1 section, and each one would have a separate articulation on the track. So, the rationale is that, if you got enough computer power and all the rest, that, is a good way to. Some people really believe in keeping those articulations on separate instrument tracks. Another reason that these orchestral templates get so huge is that quite often they're loading in every possible sound that they have in their sound library, kind of as a, just in case, instead of just thinking about it, ahead of time. It's like, what instruments do I want to try? And there's also a danger when you use the template that you just rely on how you design the template, and it stifles your creativity. But I don't know that's a valid reason to justify these huge track orchestral templates. So anyways, so what I got here is the Spitfire Symphonic Strings Violins 1, okay, and I recorded this little MIDI tune, this track up here, and in this edit view here in Studio One, you can see where all the MIDI notes are in this section. It probably has a name. This is probably the MIDI editor. The next section down, this is note velocity. So this is how you can change the height of these velocity symbols, or these lines here. I was kind of struggling to figure out what to call them, but you can make the lines shorter or longer, and the shorter is softer, and the closer you get to the very top, that's louder. All right, so there's where you can edit your velocity, and then down here, this is the key switches, and so what Studio One enables you to do now is you can create your own presets, and what you have is I'm not sure this is showing up in OBS. The edit key switch, the key switch editor pop-up. So I don't think that's showing on the screen right now, so I'm going to close that. But essentially what you can do is you can create your own key switch presets, and what you need to know is you need to know which notes are going to trigger each articulation. It's a little tricky at first, but they're pretty easy to set up once you get the hang of it. It's just more tedious to go through and then figure out, okay, this C minus 2 here, that's long, and then C sharp minus 2 is concertino, and then D minus 2 is staccato, or whatever we have here. Anyways, so you can create your own presets now, key switch presets in Studio One. Might not be the most graceful or best way to go about doing this, but there is the option, which I haven't been able to really find in Samplitude. Like I said, I was having trouble with the routing in Reaper, so I haven't successfully been able to implement the setup with Reticulate using Reaper yet. So anyway, so I've created over 200 of these key switch presets. There's lots of different libraries that I have that I created presets for, but in particular I wanted to make sure that all my orchestral sections, that all their presets had been created. And so I've got all my strings, all my woodwinds, all my brass, both individual and group ensemble patches. I got the presets made for them. Okay, so let's see. One thing I want to Okay, forget which screen I need to be on sometimes. All right, but anyways, so here's the MIDI track. Uh, Down here, you've got the articulations. These are triggered by different keys. So we've got long, then we've got spiccato is yellow, and then green over here is pizzicato, and then this one here, which is, it's kind of a lavender or maybe even, I don't know, maybe peach color, but or pink-ish. That's concertino. So these are all different articulations, and if you were playing, then you would have to be able to reach over and hit whatever key just before you start playing the note that you wanted the articulation on. So that kind of brings me to something I want to point out here. Here you start off with long, and you'll notice that here's the first note velocity. So here's the first note. Corresponds with this one here. All right. Now, if you look at where the long is, and if you were to be able to draw a line straight up, it would be to the left of this particular note. And so what you find in a lot of this this way where you can map articulations in your MIDI editors, different DAWs, is that quite often you need to make sure that you don't just have the articulation start with the note. You should bring it forward a little bit where it occurs before the note. So you got long, and then that extends before the note, and now you got the note. Because a lot of times, too, what you could do, I extended this all the way across. So you got this long section, then you got the spiccato all the way across, pizzicato. What you could do actually is you could just make it one little square here. You could shorten this bar up where you've got one little square and it's long, and then it doesn't need to extend the whole way out. It will play that articulation until it gets to the next one. So you could do this with 4 small little squares, one little red one little yellow, green, and then maybe this is pink. Anyways, so what you have is the long starts before the note. Okay, so then we go all the way over to here, and then the spiccato has to start before the note, and then you go across to here, and then we're going to switch to pizzicato, but that needs to precede the note just briefly, and so you see that there. Okay, so that's pretty much a little bit of the background and a little bit of how you use key switch presets. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to close this, and oh, I have to close it from this window. Keep forgetting that. All right, I don't get the hang of this yet, but we're going to play this back now and see how it sounds. All right, so not too bad. I'm not going to say it's a perfect little tune. If I was going to, work this out or use it for something, I would definitely, still make some edits on this. I did change some of the note lengths, and I had to modify some of the height of some of these velocity lines here. The way I'd played it into the computer, which or played it into the DAW when I initially did it, the velocities were much they were lower on the whole. I guess I was playing soft, or maybe that's just the way it came up, or the way it was recorded. But to get decent playback with voice meter and OBS and all of this, I had to make sure that they were louder velocity notes all the way across. I haven't really found that issue when I haven't been using OBS, so maybe it's more for these videos, but well, because when I'm not in OBS, the playback is fine. Don't really have to make it that loud. But anyways, just kind of wanted to, touch base with everybody. I'm still planning on doing these. Uh, just been having a lot going on with my teaching schedule. And then, like I said, I switched computers. I had to get that all going. And then I had to kind of sort out how do I get OBS and Studio One and Voicemeeter to all play together. So this take here, which now is about a half hour long, I tried probably a dozen takes before this, and I think I finally got it right. So anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in, and just everybody stay safe and keep making music.